So today I'm coming to you with a National Park Spotlight on a park many of you have heard of, I'm sure, called Death Valley National Park. This actual presentation is created by Brody Lambert, and the park was officially protected as a park in October of 1994, so much more recent than some of them. Here's where Death Valley is located. Notice that it's right here on the U.S. map, but I like that Brody put in the second map. Do you see how it juts into Nevada a little bit? But we'll say that it's mostly in California when we type. Okay, so here are some landscape views. And he put multiple pictures on one slide here. So we can see mountains. We can also see what appears to be desert. And then this picture right here is actually an important picture that Brody will get to more in his attractions. But now let's pause and watch his overview video.
It's been called the land that God had forsaken, long considered one of the harshest environments on Earth, and for good reason.
Summertime, we start to hit 100 usually in mid-April, and usually don't continue with that through mid-October. In the middle of July, June, July, and August, 120 easily. Don't miss that. Okay.
Alan Van Valkenburg knows. He's been a park ranger in Death Valley for over a decade.
The hottest I felt was 129. The day I hit 129, I went out and sat in the shaded area that was outside just to kind of think about what it felt like. And there was a slight breeze blowing. And you'd think a slight breeze would cool you down because it was in the shade. That side of me, it felt, if I thought I was going to come away it being red burnt. It felt that hot on that side.
The vast expanses of sand and rock are seemingly devoid of life. In the valley's most hostile spot, the miles and miles of salt flats are completely parched. On average, the valley gets less than 2 inches of rain each year. Some years they don't get any at all. In this extreme, desolate landscape life is often hidden. Of course, there are common creatures, bighorn sheep that live up in the mountains, coyotes, snakes, spiders, and other desert denizens. They all have one thing in common: the ability to sniff out water in a place that looks bone dry.
There is water. I mean, surrounding the hills and canyons of this park, there are over 500 different small seeps and springs. We are at the largest collection of springs.
Ranger Charlie Callahan knows that where there's water, there's life. And in Death Valley, there's more water than meets the eye. It's that ability for both fauna and flora to survive here that Callahan finds so remarkable.
It's amazing. There's over 1,000 different species of plants found in Death Valley. There's several dozen of them that are endemics that are found nowhere else in the world.
And although most of Death Valley looks exactly as it did thousands of years ago, the seeming desolation can be full of surprises.
Okay, so good overview video for us. Now we're going to get into the landscape explanation of how did Death Valley actually form. And so Brody says it has a complex science history. The oldest rocks formed at least 1.7 billion with a B, but the most common rocks are only 500 million years old. That would be like the 10-yard line near today. And they are sedimentary rocks, which means it used to be an ocean. Now, only 3 million years ago, which isn't long in the history of our planet, the pushing that built the mountains was replaced with poling. And so the bottom of the basin just fell out along 2 fault lines. And he's added in a diagram, a good diagram to go with an actual picture. So you notice this is actually Death Valley proper. So you've got a mountain range here. What's you can't really see in this picture is there's a parallel mountain range. Now, so here is the one mountain range in his diagram. Here's another. And then notice what's happened. You have extensional poling forces, and because of that poling, there's been fault lines. Are we shocked that there'd be fault lines in California? No, right? And so what's happened then is literally the bottom has collapsed out and created this valley. So when we type our dominant force, it's actually going to be faulting, which is not a force that we've used before. Now, here's how Brody connected it to our class. He said it connects to our to our plate tectonics unit, and he thought about fault lines and along a transform boundary in California. So strong connection there. Okay, so what about specific attractions, things that we would see or do? Do you remember me saying this picture right here is going to be important? So that is a close-up of a place, let me get to it again, called Badwater Basin. And Badwater Basin is the lowest elevation in the United States. It's listed at 282 feet below sea level. So here's what I mean by that. If you would take where the ocean meets at California, this is about a 28-story building lower than that. That's how much has fallen out along the fault line. And you hear it being called a salt flat. That's left over from an ancient ocean that used to be in this now desert. So Badwater Basin, if I ever get to go here, is the top of my list. Now, this is also a very popular attraction. It's called Dante's View, and you can overlook Death Valley at over 5,000 feet. So now can you see what I mean by two parallel mountain ranges, right? And so faulting is where that has collapsed. And then his next attraction is fun to say. This is called Ubi Hebi Crater, and it's a long volcanic crater, a large volcanic crater in a volcanic field. And it's about half a mile wide, and it goes 777 feet deep, he says. Okay, so what about plant life? You heard in the video that there are plants here because there's groundwater and springs and oases. The Joshua tree is one common plant. Another plant there is the desert gold, and I've read these only bloom after they get a heavy rain, which is of course rare. And then the barrel cactus, I'm not sure what happened to this picture there, but lots of cacti. Okay, so the first animal that Brody selected is endemic, which you heard the park ranger use that term. It means it's only in Death Valley. This is called the Devil's Hole pupfish. And so I wanted you guys to see Devil's Hole. This is it. This is a spot in the park, and these pupfish only live there. And the most recent I could find is that there are 35 left, so they're definitely on the endangered species list. But doesn't it look small? So that's the entrance. But notice that there's a deep groundwater lake that would be left over from when this was a much more wet climate. So I've read that divers have actually been all the way down there. So it looks like these fish don't have much water because it's a narrow entrance, but they actually do have more than you think. Now, by the way, this water is very hot and it has low dissolved oxygen though because of the surface area. So these little fish are pretty marvelous at surviving in a tough climate. That's the devil's pupfish. And honestly, Devil's Hole is an attraction all on its own. Now, this is a lizard called a chuckwalla. And that's the real name of it. And then finally, we have the antelope ground squirrel. There's a little family of them. Okay, so I want you to know that sometimes there are current events where people don't die in a park. It's not dangerous. You just have to be careful. And there was a fatality in late January where an experienced canyoneer died in a rock slide. So, yeah, okay. Don't really. Lots of people go to national parks and survive. So Brody's most interesting thing he learned about the park was how it formed by that collapsing landmass and became the lowest point in North America, and also that it had some volcanic activity. He forgot to put in the thing he'd most like to see or do. I'll tell you what mine is. I definitely want to see Devil's Hole. But for me, I want to stand at Badwater Basin. I want to stand knowing I'm over 280 feet lower than the Pacific Ocean on the coast there, and just to be able to look up and experience those mountains on either side. So now, if you need to pause me to bring up your presentation chart, go ahead and do that. But let's go through now that presentation chart. So this was Brody, B-R-O-D-Y, Brody L, Brody Lambert. And the name of his park, of course, is spelled right here. It's Death Valley. It's up to you. I definitely want you to put California, but if you want to add Nevada, because it does spill into Nevada a little, you can. And then our dominant force that shaped the land, remember, it's a unique one we haven't typed yet. It's faulting. Okay, so cracks in the crust, boom, that made the Death Valley. That's our dominant force. And then you're going to rank this based on how much you would like to go to Death Valley. So a 10 meaning the most. And then attractions that you might highlight and bring in pictures. Of course, there's Badwater Basin. There was Dante's View. and then Ubi Hebe Crater, and another one, honestly, would be Devil's Hole. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed Brody's presentation.